Yes!
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another brand new episode of The Completionist. So for many years, everyone's been telling me to play the Crash Bandicoot games as if I've never heard of them before. But here's the thing, I already played Crash Bandicoot 2 and 3 here on the show, but I never really played the first one. In fact, if I can recall, I really don't like the first one. At least when I was a kid, I really hated it. So now that Crash Bandicoot 1 through 3 has been recently announced that we're getting complete remasterings, I thought, you know what? I'll give it a shot. I'll play the very first and the very worst in the original Crash Bandicoot trilogy. Here's my review of Crash Bandicoot. Back in the console wars, we were on the verge of seeing a fantastic unity between Sony and Nintendo. The idea was that Nintendo would release a CD-based console called the Nintendo Playstation. But as the story would go on, Nintendo betrayed their bond with Sony and announced a new partnership with a different company. Sony would move on to then release their own console, the Sony Playstation. So here comes Sony with a new console, and they wanted a mascot that will rival Sega's Sonic and Nintendo's Mario. Universal Studios then partnered up with Sony and a new developer known as Naughty Dog to collaborate on the game. Initially, their icon that they came up with was known as Willy the Wombat. This idea was scrapped altogether as there was already a cartoon character known as Willy the Wombat. Eventually, they landed on Crash Bandicoot as he was a bandicoot that crashed into boxes. Thank you, Shane, and Did You Know Gaming? Checks in the mail. So lo and behold, a new hero was born, Crash Bandicoot. Naughty Dog would go on to create many more games, but they eventually left the IP with Universal. And since then, Crash has been kind of a big pile of trash. Now me personally, I love the second and the third one, but I've always dreaded the first one. It's not nearly as refined as the other two. And by the time I got my PlayStation 1, Crash Bandicoot 2 was already out. So while I did the other two on the show already, I thought, screw it. Let's see if my nostalgic remembrance of the later two holds up against the first one in the series. Crash Bandicoot is literally a bandicoot who has been experimented on. Demented, I know. Just in case all of you normal people out there in the world who don't know what a bandicoot looks like, this is a bandicoot. Aww. Pretty cute, right? Being held against his will in the Wombat Islands of Australia, Crash Bandicoot was born out of the mutation process. He has been mutated by an invention called the Evolvo Ray. Dr. Neo Cortex is our antagonist and will continue to be so in the next few games. He's a mad scientist who's constantly under fire for his horrible theories. All of Cortex's haters end up fueling his rage for world domination. Thanks to his henchman, Dr. Nitrous Brio, Dr. Cortex and Brio created the Evolvo Ray, which lets them turn mindless animals into soldiers. With the two of them working together, they created Crash and Tawna. Tawna? T-A-W-N-A. Tawna. There we go. Who is Crash's girlfriend and love interest in the game. Now she is, how do I word this? Awkwardly way too attractive for this game? It's okay, she doesn't show up in the next ones. Oh, spoilers. So, a simple plot is here right for us. Crash Bandicoot wants to enact his revenge on Dr. Cortex. Cortex and Brio want to take over the world. Crash wants to save his girlfriend. Simple stuff across the board. Not too bad. A bit too damselly for my taste, but the story only gets better from here on out in regards to the next few games. I think the weirdest thing about Crash is Aku Aku, who is a witch doctor who leaves his scattered masks of himself all over the islands. We never really get a true explanation as to why he's helping Crash out. And overall, there's not really a use of a witch doctor. It somehow ends up making sense by the third one, I think? I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it's weird overall. But then again, a plumber in a Mushroom Kingdom and a hedgehog in a Green Hill Zone. Yeah, games don't make sense, you guys.
Groovy!
With the debut of new consoles, everyone tends to wait in bated breath about the newest and the coolest in graphics. I mean, even in the early days of the Nintendo Entertainment System, we had people saying things like this.
Whoa, nice graphics. I'd like to get my hands on that game.
When it came to the dawn of the Sega Saturn, the PlayStation, and the Nintendo 64, graphics were a huge thing to get people going on what console to pick. And Crash Bandicoot was a pretty good selling point for those PlayStation doubters. One of the big things about the PlayStation's internal video mode was that it used video memory dedicated for textures and layering, but Naughty Dog figured out early on that they could also use that video mode for shaded polygons instead. With character models only requiring some pixels, this gave them a huge boost in using the tech in a different way. This is huge, considering that for a brand new console, they went a completely other way. This technique may explain why a lot of early games in the PlayStation lifespan opted for shaded polygons over textures. And for the most part, that doesn't necessarily mean that those games were good, because, oh boy, were there a lot of bad games on the PlayStation. That's why the boxes in Crash Bandicoot played such a pivotal role for the entire game. Each level has boxes that are scattered around, and the fact that they were so easy to multiply and create, it gave the devs a lot more of a leg up when it came to level design and creativity. The fact that there were so many boxes on screen at once and didn't hinder the game's engine is kind of amazing. Now, it's hard for me to not compare all three of these games against each other, considering that I already tackled the second and third one, and I really despise the first one. But I think it's made my appreciation of the first game go up a fair amount. One thing that I will say about the first Crash that got it right was its overall cohesiveness. The game fits together very nicely. The music, the sound effects, level designs, even the color palettes all blend really well together. For this era of game, it's very easy to get lost and make insane choices, and Crash 1 tends to make a lot of sense. I would say that the first one makes way more sense than the second and the third, those of which would use different locations involving knights and wizards, the extreme crazy future, and even bikes on a highway. But in those games, they do make sense because those levels are portals versus an overworld hub that's on an island. Speaking of which, the island overworld is simple and clean with the way that it's making me feel tonight, but it's hard to let it go. The lack of UI. Starting out, collectibles don't really seem to matter, but the more you get better at the game, the more you'll start to unlock. And it just kind of appears somewhere on screen next to the title of the level. Whereas in Crash Bandicoot 2 and 3, they're promptly a part of the design hub of the world. Crash's character model is kind of fascinating. He doesn't really have a neck, so 2D-wise, he looks like a disfigured Doritos chip. Nacho cheese specifically, hashtag not an ad, especially after last week, but hashtag could be an ad if you call me Frito-Lay. This design, while definitely the worst of the three games, is kind of endearing. Crash looks like a big old doofus. It goes along with his death animations and sounds very well, and it kind of makes us appreciate this somewhat silent protagonist a bit more. Imagine if he looked like the gigantic buff boy Universal Studios furry that he looks like when he's at the park. Yeah, that's pretty damn terrifying. None of my kids are meeting Crash Bandicoot today. None of them. Crash Bandicoot, which ended up being the brainchild of Andy, Gavin, and Jason Rubin, was set in motion to do one thing: to set itself aside from Sega/Sonic, Nintendo/Mario, and Warner Brothers/Tasmanian Devil. They wanted an icon that would represent something cute, real, and something no one would really know anything about. And that sentiment can be said about the actual game itself. Crash Bandicoot is a 2.5D platformer that, for its time, redefined the genre, mostly because there really wasn't a game quite like it. I mean, yes, there were rodent platformers that existed, but the ones that were good were very far and few between, and Crash quickly rose to the top. However, it's not as easy as one would think. The entire point of Crash is to jump and spin attack your way through dozens of boxes, baddies, and obstacles to get to the warp door at the end of every level. Every level has a start and end point with several checkpoints along the way. With our main goal of rescuing Tana being our focus, Crash must traverse through the many different locales. These locales include beaches, ruins of temples, actual temples, and even castles. Eventually, it all leads up to this evil tower at the very top. I will say, there are tons of obstacles that will frustrate you pretty easily. Patience is key. Then again, it is my job to be patient all the time, so you know how we do. In terms of collectibles, Crash collects Wampa Fruit. When he gets 100, he gets an extra life. For more viability, Crash can also collect the Aku Aku masks. Each mask gives him an extra hit of life. If he collects 3 in a row, he temporarily becomes invincible, letting him destroy anything and everyone that stands in his way. Speaking of enemies that stand in your way, the bosses of Crash Bandicoot are quite a joke. you can easily defeat them after watching their patterns for a few brief moments. Now, Gerard, all the bosses in this series are easy. Sure, I agree with you, but the game doesn't seem to think so. In fact, every time you die, the game gives you an Aku Aku mask. This game has little faith in the player. There's 3 types of bonus stages in Crash 1. There's the Tana stages, which is the most accessible and most common, the Dr. Embryo stages, which are real hard bonus stages, and then there's the Dr. Cortex bonus stages. Tana and Embryo bonus stages are just for extra fruit and lives, but the Dr. Cortex stages are for getting keys. There's 2 keys in the game which unlock additional levels, so I hope you like precise jumping because you're going to have to get really good at it. Now, I wish I could say this is where this gameplay section ends. However, I do got quite a few bones to pick with Crash Bandicoot. Now I'm gonna try my best to sound decent and calm. First off, the camera and the control of the camera in this game is pretty damn bad. Granted, it did not improve in the other games, at least the camera had purpose. The camera placement is very bad in some of these levels, leaving you to jump forward and pray that you land on the correct platform. Look at this jump right here. Every single time I think I'm going to die. And sometimes the depth perception is way off. It's very hard to tell if you've gone too far forward or not far enough. All they had to do in these moments was to turn the camera slightly to the diagonal to make it work. This problem, unfortunately, happens a lot more than I would have liked to have in the game. And since this is the first Crash game, levels that feature Crash running towards the screen away from something are definitely the worst. Crash Bandicoot kind of asks you to think ahead of the game a lot, and these levels definitely prove that. There are a few moments where the game indicates it correctly, but for the most part, you're boned. It takes practice and practice and practice and lots of practice to get these down. They polished these levels in the later games, but, you know, for now, not very great. Now, maybe I am biased, but the most frustrating thing I endured in my playthrough of Crash Bandicoot ultimately had to be about the one thing the show was about, completing the game. If you're familiar with the Crash series, then you'll know this, kind of. Collecting and destroying every single box in the level will grant you a silver gem. Now, in some stages, you can't get all the boxes right away, as you need a colored gem. And in some levels, you can collect these secret colored gems, which then act as a secretive platform carrier to help you collect more lives or get more boxes to be destroyed. With me so far? So some of you, I can hear you, I can hear you, I can hear you, get out of my head, I can hear you. Sorry, I can hear your thoughts, and I know what you're about to say. Oh, that's easy, stop whining, you should play Tales of Symphonia. To which I say, nay. 1, I'm not finished with my point yet, and 2, Tales of Symphonia is going to get wrecked soon enough, but I won't tell you when. You'll have to live in anticipation. But more importantly, getting all the boxes may seem easy at first, but there's a stipulation that doesn't apply for the other games. You have to beat every level collecting every single box without dying in one try. Just let me try that one more time in case you didn't understand. I repeat, you have to beat every single level without dying, getting every single freaking box. And the curve in the game gets steep very, very quickly. Truth be told, in my opinion, Crash Bandicoot 1 may be the hardest out of the original Crash trilogy. While the other games may have more levels, more collectibles, and more secrets, the difficulty in the first one is pretty damn high, and it only gets more difficult as the game goes on. None of the levels are too impossible, but getting all of the boxes without dying in one go makes this game pretty masochistic for a completionist. So you fought your way to the top of Dr. Cortex's crazy, wacky, science-based castle. It's time to take him down, to do your thing, do your stuff. After conquering 32 levels, collecting 26 gems and 2 keys, it's time to fight Dr. Cortex himself. This boss fight is pretty elementary. All you gotta do is wait for Cortex to shoot green blobs at you, and then you spin attack them right back at him. The boss will get progressively more difficult, but dodging everything is pretty easy peasy as long as you wait patiently and let the doctor slip up. Plus, there's that whole Aku mask thing when you die, so, pretty easy for a final boss. Once defeated, we are then greeted to the end screen of Tana picking up and holding Crash. Crash, with the biggest and dopiest smile, sits there as the tower behind him burns to the ground. Good job, Crash. You murdered everyone, all in the name of your girlfriend. I hope she's back for the second and third game. Whoa! As I said before, if you decide to complete this game, which by the way, you don't need reminding, but it's pretty damn hard, you can get an actual alternate ending. At this point, you probably already figured out how to get that, so let's just get right to it. When you go back to the level known as the Great Hall, you'll see that there's a silver gem floating in front of you. If you jump on it, you'll realize that all 26 silver gems you've got act as rotating platforms that will lead you to an alternate exit from the Great Hall. Doing so will grant you access to a secret ending in which we see Tana and Crash riding a vulture out into the sunset. We are then given a follow-up Where Are They Now update report of all the villains in the game. Now, since this is one of the very first PlayStation games out there, they did offer a save function for memory cards, but they also added a password system. A part of me thinks they did this because they were worried that early adopters of the PlayStation would not be able to afford memory cards. That's real nice of Naughty Dog to do that. However, technically, for you lazy goers out there, you could just find a password online and skip to the very end 100%. You jerks. Crash Bandicoot as the first game in the would-be trilogy is awesome. It's got plenty of difficult moments, it's simple to play, and overall fun. However, compared to the other games in the series, this game is just not nearly as good. To beat the game is not that bad at all, but you're going to be bummed when you get to the completing aspect of it. In my playthrough of Crash Bandicoot, there were 28 hours of total playtime, 32 levels completed, 26 silver gems and colored gems collected, 2 keys, 49 deaths, and 1 date with a Lady Bandicoot who probably won't be in the next few games. Hashtag she's not in the games. Hashtag spoilers. I will say, I was somewhat impressed with Crash Bandicoot. It definitely wasn't as bad as I imagined it to be. My appreciation of the sequels have gone up for sure, but I would recommend that anyone who's playing these games for the first time really just do that. Play the game. Crash Bandicoot 1 was a pleasant surprise of a good time. I haven't played the first one in years, so it was fun revisiting this little gem, but I have to say, I know that everyone's mad at me for comparing the second and third one so much. Oh, the second and third one were so great. Guys, it's true. The second and the third one were way better than the first one, and that's okay. The first one still holds up very well on its own, despite the fact that Crash doesn't have a neck at all. That's very weird. Completionists out there are really going to have a hard time with this game. I cannot stress how hard it is to beat a level in a one-shot go situation of collecting all of the boxes, getting all of the secret gems. It's a pretty stressful time, but if you're playing it for fun, just for a one-shot go kind of thing, then Crash Bandicoot holds up pretty damn well. So, with that in mind, guys, I give this game my completionist rating of play it. That's all the time we have for today, guys, so please, as always, let me know what you thought about today's episode somewhere on the internet. Question of the day, if you were a brand new console, what would your icon be and why? I don't know what I would be. I like to think that Cloud from Final Fantasy VII is like he's my icon. That's who I would pick. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Now, if you excuse me, this is me dying a bunch in Crash Bandicoot. It sucks. I'm bad at this game.